So yeah, thank you for that introduction. I am Ben from the Merseyside Biobank, and I am here to talk to you about the City Nature Challenge and iNaturalist. When I was putting these together, these slides, this information for this talk, I had a kind of a bit of a look into it. So I'm giving you a broad overview. I'm touching on quite a few different subjects today, but I am quite keen that we do have a bit of Q&A and some discussion later on. So please do bear that in mind as I'm going through. If you've got questions or if you disagree with some of what I'm saying, there's nothing wrong in that. And I'm quite keen to hear all the various opinions and perspectives that are out there from this community. We've got a good turnout today. It was about 20, 25 people. So hopefully there's some different ideas coming through. So what am I going to cover today? Well, I'm going to touch on citizen science. Just kind of as a bit of a basic introduction, just to make sure we're all grounded and understanding what citizen science, broadly speaking, is all about and how this actually relates to iNaturalist and the City Nature Challenge. And I'm going to talk a little bit, so a few slides on the City Nature Challenge itself. To be fair, there's not an awful lot I can say about it. I think Hannah's just summarised the majority of this year's information, but I will talk about a little bit about the history, about where it's come from, and about how it's grown and over the years and has started to impact our behaviour around wildlife observation, and what that might mean in terms of citizen science, you know, how useful it is and where that data goes. So again, then going into iNaturalist itself, which is a much broader thing. It's a separate thing. So again, exploring the platform a little bit. I am also going to touch on a bit more practical use. So I'm going to bring in how you could potentially go away and use iNaturalist itself. What are some of the features and some of the things that you might think, oh, actually, that's quite interesting. I would love to be able to do that. So maybe give you some ideas of things you can go away and explore as well. Biodiversity data. So while iNaturalist and the engagement side of it is fantastic, there's also this data that's back office kind of data stuff. So I will touch on that. I'm not going to go massively in depth in terms of data flow and that side of it. But if anyone does have any questions in particular, it's quite a broad subject. So I'm quite happy to have some discussion at the end about the pros and cons, maybe shine a bit of a light on where all this data goes, why we're asking people to collect it, and all the rest of that. User perspective, as I've just mentioned, I want to talk a bit about the features and give you a bit of an introduction for what the platform can do and all the rest of that. And then we'll end on a few events, some links. I'll talk a little bit about things coming up that you might want to perhaps get involved in. And then after that, we'll go into the Q&A. So if you could save up your questions for the discussion at the end, that'd be great. I might think about getting you try and get some responses as we're going on. That's entirely up to you, and we'll see how we go. So first things first, this is the slide I warned Eric about earlier. This is me in my natural environment. So I'm almost clean shaven today, but you leave me out in the Highlands long enough, that's what happens. Now, the reason I put this up is because I'm presenting this talk today. So this is very heavily coming from my perspective, my experiences with iNaturalist and the City Nature Challenge. So I think it's useful for you to perhaps understand a little bit about where I'm coming from and who I actually am. So I'm Ben Deed. My background is actually in volunteering, biology recording. I come from via the Lancs Wildlife Trust into my current career. So my interest really is in natural history, about engaging with the natural environment and studying wildlife. I like the small things. I like bryophytes and springtails. And actually, iNaturalist does really help if those are your kind of interests, if that's the angle you come at from. I don't specialise much. I'm not actually, a proper research scientist or anything like that, although iNaturalist, again, as a platform, can support that kind of thing. So I just wanted to let you know a little bit about me in that way, just so you can perhaps understand my perspective, and I hope that you'll have other perspectives as well that you can bring to the discussion later. So as has already been announced, the main reason I'm here today is because I run the Merseyside Biobank, which is the equivalent local environmental record centre north of the Mersey. So this is a general collage of Biobank and our activities, our area. Merseyside Biobank is probably one of the smallest local environmental record centres in the country. But I'm quite proud of it, I have to say. We've got a fantastic range of habitats. We've got the very heavily urbanised Liverpool City region, Liverpool area, Liverpool City itself. And then we've also got the fantastic dune systems on the Sefton coast and the post-industrial areas out of St Helens and Knowsley, so the old colliery sites, a lot of which is now being reclaimed. So there's some really interesting biodiversity comes through there. So we have native habitats and these heavily man-modified stuff, and a lot of these really interesting, fascinating brownfield sites as well. So a great range of biodiversity. As you can see, we've got your typical charismatic species, your red squirrels, dune tiger beetles, absolutely fantastic. But we also have things like the house sparrows, which are a priority species in our area, and also other things like spiders and the like, which are often very under-recorded, but are still really important to gather data on throughout our area. So as I've already mentioned, these are the topics that we'll cover, but please do, as we're going on, think up some questions. Otherwise, it'll be really quiet when I finish, and I don't like a lot of silence. I like a bit of feedback, so I'm hoping for some discussion towards the end. So first off, citizen science. It's a very general term. It's become one of these kind of buzzwords in recent years. Everyone's into citizen science. But in actual fact, citizen science as a thing has been around for quite a while. So just looking at the quote there on the side, so citizen science is the involvement of the public in scientific research, whether community-driven research or global investigations. If we kind of break that down a little bit, you know, just being public involvement. So it's the public being involved in research or the study of nature. And certainly in the UK, we have this fantastic history of biological recording, of the study of natural history. We didn't call it citizen science back then, but that's what we've been doing. And those kind of things have been going on since at least the 1800s. So we're looking at several hundred years worth of citizen science in some form or another. So while we do badge this stuff now as citizen science, and the term citizen science does attract funding and it attracts the interest of funders, in fact, we have been doing it for a long time. It's been picked up and it's become such a big thing in recent years, probably for a variety of reasons. I mean, there has been a renewed interest, but that interest has come in part from organisation realising the value of citizen science. So if you can tap into this massive resource of individuals who are willing to go out and collect data for your research, there's really incredible cost savings along with it. Let's be frank, saving money is quite a driver, certainly in terms of kind of statutory agencies, government agencies that are quite often poorly funded, some research institutions. If you're doing a PhD, you've got your one or two person, a small team, but you need a large sample of data to be able to undertake your research. Actually, citizen science is a very good answer to that. So it has become this global phenomenon. As well as that, you have to have people that want to do it, and that's kind of been driven in a large way by people caring a lot more about the things that the people that design citizen science projects actually want to be doing. So where you've got research aimed, for example, at the environment or at astronomical studies, then there's quite a large pool of people who are inspired by that kind of thing and want to get involved. So all we've been missing really is the technology, that kind of middle ground. So if you've got the drivers from the organisation for large sample, for funding savings and the rest of it, you've got the pool of interested people. Actually having then the technology, which we have done, especially in recent years, then it enables that really kind of mass participation citizen science and how you can go away and deliver that. So there's a couple of links just at the bottom of that slide. The Natural History Museum runs all sorts of citizen science projects, UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and the Biological Record Centre nationally. Do run a lot of citizen science or coordinate citizen science type projects. But also this Zooniverse is quite interesting because that has a lot of non-nature related citizen science. And I suppose it's one of the things I wanted to do here was actually to point out citizen science is an incredibly broad church. And it's, while certainly from our perspective and the things that we do, natural history really is very central to our work. Actually, there's a lot of other citizen science that does take place. For example, going through historic weather logs that were charted by the ancient seagoers, or looking at the stars and mapping out uncovering patterns within the stars and telescope data. So Zooniverse really is a great platform for that in particular. I just wanted to give that a bit of a shout out, because if you're into this kind of thing and want to get involved in online projects, particularly from home, if you can't get out, then Zooniverse really is a great platform to have a look at. So the other thing with citizen science and science in general really is, you know, as individuals, as humans, very often we have this desire and this curiosity to discover. And for me, and I think this is kind of personal opinion, I suppose, really, you know, joining a citizen science project taps into that curiosity. It enables us and gives us a bit of direction to go out and discover and to learn new things and to contribute to new research and learning. So actually, as a participant in citizen science, what we're doing is something that, you know, probably almost into prehistory, people have been doing, you know, engaging with the world around us, using our curiosity to drive discovery. And that's what citizen science is all about. And that's one of the things I actually really do love about it. I hope you can tell. But yeah, and I hope you do as well. So yeah, perceptions change. I've gone through that. And yeah, so your individual interest really is a major driver for anyone participating in citizen science. So just to touch on one of the uses. So the chart on the right, and apologies if you can't see it particularly well, I will talk you a little bit through it. There are lots of different types of citizen science. So typically, particularly even until, you know, to the current day, citizen science is often quite structured, and there are good reasons for that. So a lot of the research institutions, think of our national schemes and societies, these very long-term monitoring projects, those are quite often citizen science projects that are coordinated using volunteers that apply a method in the field to collect data that's fed back to a particular organisation, and then they can then analyse that data. And actually, in this example, I've used butterfly conservation, the wider countryside butterfly survey, which is a particularly long-running survey and has very strong data from long-term monitoring that's now able to show long-term trends, declines, or range expansions or contractions in butterfly species. And I like this example because it's a particularly powerful one, because actually this survey, this citizen science driven survey, now influences government and decision making, because the structured data, the power of that data through citizen science, that mass participation, that large scale data collection covering the whole of the UK, is able to influence decision makers. And this is something I'll come back to later, which is something which is particularly powerful for local record centres and the volunteers and groups that engage with us as well. So yeah, the butterfly one's quite nice. The chart there actually shows the last 2 years, well, it's 2020 and 2019's worth of data. And straight away you can kind of, so on the left there, you've got abundance of occurrence of species in squares. And on the right there, you've got declines or increases in number of squares where they were found, butterflies were found present, using the method within the wider countryside survey. So straight away, when you start to present the citizen science-based data, you can immediately, you know, show there's an impact, show there's things going on. Then you expand that over time, and I really just wanted to underline the strength of citizen science-based survey. So yeah, the other thing I suppose that's worth pointing out is that the other drivers that might be encouraging people are things like the current biodiversity crisis, the climate crisis we're going through, and people see these things in the media and they want to engage with them. And this in particular drives, I think, a focus on environmental-based citizen science and natural history-based citizen science, because people see and want to engage with and help. And actually citizen science is a great way that people as individuals can go out and contribute to helping, either through monitoring, and it is a kind of direct action, you know, and it makes people feel good as much as anything else, that they can participate in trying to, you know, make the case, make the argument that things need to be done. If they can't or are unable to do things directly themselves, actually you can still have that wider impact through recording as part of these kind of schemes. So, I mean, that's all I'm going to say on citizen science for now, because I can barely pronounce it anyway. My mouth's gone a bit dry. But moving on, so the City Nature Challenge itself is a form of citizen science. Sorry, I've just clicked off my slide. That's what I wanted. Did that move on? Can you just nod? Yeah, good. So City Nature Challenge is a form of citizen science, but it's not structured. And this is something that we're seeing increasingly. So we've got these new technologies that have come in, which are brilliant for allowing people to engage with citizen science type work and projects. But it's also allowing people to engage more directly and more immediately with their interests in natural history. So recording wildlife, for example, whereas in the past, it was perhaps a little bit more difficult to do so. Platforms like iNaturalist have brought in, or have made it far more accessible and less of a hurdle. So people can go online and they can have a look at these things and just have a go. And they don't think anyone's going to criticise them. People probably never know they've been on it. So they're quite happy to have a go and play with it. And that's kind of really been pushed by these events in terms of iNaturalist, by the City Nature Challenge. So, I mean, looking at the dates there, City Nature Challenge is very, very recent. It only started in 2016, just a few years ago. And it was purely a bit of fun between two city areas. So San Francisco there and Los Angeles. They decided to use the iNaturalist platform and have a bit of a go about who had the best wildlife. So they defined their little areas and they had a competition. I thought, actually, this is quite fun. They got quite a lot of participation. Why don't we open it up a bit wider? So they did, and for the next year or so, they had other cities within America signed up first off. And then in 2018, they went international. So in that first year, there were 68 cities over 17 countries all around the world that took part. And it's important to remember this City Nature Challenge is just a 4-day event. So it's a very brief snapshot in terms of wildlife, and it's a very brief period which to engage within an area. But it's a lot of fun. It's quite highly dependent on weather, I have to say as well. But it's a great way to engage with the platform and engage with wildlife as well. So the City Nature Challenge has these broad aims. So in the green box at the bottom there, which is to connect people to local nature. And as a record centre, from that record centre angle, that's something we can really identify with, I think. So it's one of our main reasons for being, is to provide that local input and that local engagement with people in their natural environment. And like one of the other points on there, to raise awareness of local wildlife and conservation issues. So this does that kind of, you know, that's one of their visions, I suppose. One of their aims is that they would like people to engage with local nature, but also to connect people with each other. So a lot of the times we think about these apps and websites and the internet, and actually what you typically imagine is people going onto them and just focusing on their internet and forgetting the people and everything else, kind of isolating themselves and blinkering themselves within that internet environment. But actually, the City Nature Challenge seeks to broaden things and connect people with each other. So one of its primary aims is to build an online community of like-minded naturalists, of people interested in wildlife nature, regardless of their skills and ability. And this 4-day period is a really great way to do that. And you tend to find with the City Nature Challenge, depending on the city, depending on the organisers and the organising group, they'll quite often run events within the region. So within the Liverpool City region, we've entered for the past couple of years now. And we do try to run events, at least a core event for each of our local authority areas that will bring people together and help people to engage via the apps, using the challenge as a bit of a proxy, but really try to get them to engage with nature on a site, teach them a bit about it, and show them what's going on, to teach them a bit about ecology, hopefully teach them maybe about some species identification, about the value, for example, of parks and green spaces, which is something that in the Liverpool City region back in 2019, which was one of our main reasons for engaging with the City Nature Challenge, was to try and raise the profile of wildlife, biodiversity, and the importance of green space with the combined authority, because the combined authority apparently was listening and wanted to do this year of environment. So we kind of said, well, okay, you want to listen, well, we're going to show you what's here. And then really the City Nature Challenge was an incredible vehicle for that, because it had the global promotion and the global backing. Within the UK, there's a very strong backing from the Bristol Natural History Consortium. So that really helped to raise the profile of what we were doing. We weren't just kind of a one-person record centre trying to deliver some event to a few people. You know, this became a thing that they wanted to engage in. And that really also helped get other people engaged as well, because you could see what was going on elsewhere. So just to give you an idea, I mean, to engage with the City Nature Challenge really is quite straightforward. You download the app, or even without the mobile app, you take a picture of some wildlife and then you share it on the website. It really is that simple. And it's really interesting and nice to see the other kind of stuff that's going on. So just a random few selections on this page are all from this year's City Nature Challenge. So you've got your wall lizards there, a lot of beautiful blue jay, harlequin ladybirds, so we can detect invasive species. People are sharing that information as well. Butterflies, honeybees, massively and widespread. But even things like the garlic mustard there, you know, you think about that kind of thing maybe in your local woodland, but it's, you know, being picked up all around the world. And I think the City Nature Challenge and the kind of global angle of that really can open your eyes to the other things that are going on and everything else that's out there. I'm just going to roll this back a sec, because the other thing I wanted to point out was that chart at the bottom, which I think is absolutely amazing. You know, this is based on the number of observations, this particular one. So every City Nature Challenge, that is that spike. That's when people are recording. So this is number of records on iNaturalist through the year. And you can see every year you get this incredible spike of engagement. And over the last year, you know, there were over 45,000 species detected. And actually looking at it now, there's over 47. So there's a bit of lag in terms of identification period. You know, in just 4 days, how incredible is that? You know, 1,270,000 people engaging with nature. Sorry, 52,000, no, 52,000, making 1,270,000 observations. You know, 52,000 people in 4 days is still a pretty hefty chunk of the population. And it did cover 44 countries as well. So there's this incredibly broad range of information that comes on. And I'm going to touch on using iNaturalist later. And one of the things I do want to show you is actually, it's very easy to then explore that as well. So if you want to see what's going on elsewhere in the world, it's very, very easy to do that. But I'll come to that later. So just flicking back. So in the UK, this was this year. Like I said, we are largely led to an extent by the Bristol Natural History Consortium. They've dropped the Bristol, they want to be more inclusive, that's fine. And there were 14 cities this year for the first year, which is obviously the highest number we've had. So there's quite a nice range of cities. We had some nice competition up in the northwest here, because we had Greater Manchester, the Liverpool City region and Lancashire County, excluding the city regions, all took part. Which was particularly nice because the Lancashire Wildlife Trust had to divide themselves up into little teams, and it was nice to see them fight it out and fight our corner. So that's good. A bit of relationship building as well. So not everyone, I should mention this, not everyone is in to the competitive angle of this, which is fine. You know, competition is a bit of a motivator if you're into that kind of thing. but actually the whole discovery side of it is fantastic as well. And I think you should never underplay what you can discover and what you can learn through this kind of thing as well. I'm going to cover a lot of this in iNaturalist and how you use it. So the City Nature Challenge is just this 4-day event, but there's a much broader platform behind all that, which I'll come on to next. So, but as a UK, we did pretty well, bearing in mind there's over 400 cities around the world taking part. We're a little bit obsessed in this country by nature, which I think is brilliant. We should be playing that up a lot more. And so 3 of the UK cities were in the top 10% across the world there in terms of numbers of observations, which I think is incredible. And up in the top right, you probably can't see that. That's the league table for, I think, for our City Nature Challenge weekend. And just to point that out, we've got 3 of the 6 are individuals from the Liverpool City region in the top 6 in the country, which I think is brilliant. So we're clearly the best at it. There's 3 others there. You've got Eco Record, Learn, and Brighton. Those are organisational accounts, which is a little bit dodgy in my opinion. But I know Learn is mostly Dave Earl, which is also Northwest, which is fine. So there's 2 others there, 2 organisational accounts, which I'm not really counting. So really, we're the best, is what I'm saying. And I'd just like to get that across to you. So hopefully next year you can join us and make us even better. So results of the City Nature Challenge, just this next section down, the top 5 most recorded species. And I think this is worth looking at. So we've got wood pigeon, garlic mustard, blackbird, cow parsley, and lesser celandine. So they're not going to blow your mind, these species, but they are things that people are going out and looking for. And actually, if you think about the role of the Record Centre, which Iona was talking about earlier when she introduced Record itself, a lot of these common species are actually quite under-recorded. So this kind of BioBlitz type event, this City Nature Challenge, that encourages people to go out and compete a little bit. So you're going to start recording those common things as well because you want to win. That's actually a really useful tool because it's filled actually for us as data users and for our service users, that fills in a lot of gaps. Actually, all of a sudden, people weren't bothering with lesser celandine and cow parsley. Well, now we know, well, those species are where they're occurring more readily. And there's a term used by the BSBI, axiophytes, and those are species that people are drawn to. Not necessarily rare, but they can be quite useful for building trends because people record them more consistently. Now, if we talk about that in the context of the City Nature Challenge, if we're getting these species popping up, is there something we can be doing with that data because we have more of it, because people are actually sending it in rather than thinking, that's common, I won't bother. And as a driving force, the City Nature Challenge has been really useful for picking up and detecting what otherwise might be species that you'd never think of bothering to record. And the other side of that, obviously, is if you don't know much about nature, it really highlights how you can still contribute as well. So if all you're doing is, taking some snaps of some garlic mustard or your blackbird in your back garden, that's still valid. These are the top species people record. Why wouldn't you record them? So you can go away and be proud in the fact that you are recording common species as much as anything else. But that's not all people were recording, and we do have over 1,000 species, 1,500 species of plants there, 150 species of birds, over 700 insects, 49 species of mammal apparently, which is actually, again, a real achievement. There's a lot of diversity being picked up by this study. And quite often with this kind of mass participation, non-structured kind of event, and this is non-structured, we're basically saying go out and record stuff. That's actually really useful for detecting rare things and things that you wouldn't normally see or record, because you're going outside the structure, you're visiting things and places at a time when you might not normally do so. I hope the cat's enjoying this. He's drawn by my voice. So yeah, and in this case, we did pick up on some really unusual things. So we have the spoonbill in Merseyside. It popped up at both Merseyside and Hale. And that was brilliant. I don't think we have any previous data of that species at all. Also, windchat was detected on the Sefton coast. which is something that really is quite unusual for our area. And down in London, they had a green veined orchid, which popped up. So people are finding stuff that are otherwise really unusual, as well as the common things. And I think this kind of challenge is really useful for that. And well over 3,000 people took part in the UK, which I think is quite useful, and also it helps us make the case that people are interested in this stuff and people want to engage with nature. So these kind of statistics, while okay, there's a competitive angle, the numbers make a very clear argument to funders, to government, to policymakers, to say people care about this stuff. There's a lot of people taking part, and also this is actually the diversity. So we get a lot of comments that, oh, it's a city area, there's nothing there. Well, actually, we've just blitzed it. All these people have gone out to the parks and they found all these species, and that's incredibly visible. And the numbers there really do help to make an argument, help to make a case and evidence what the kind of arguments that we're trying to make for protecting biodiversity and protecting these important spaces. So just onto that, I've messed that up again. There we go. So this is just a very quick selection of pictures from the City Nature Challenge last year, from the Liverpool City region specifically, because I wanted to give you a feel for the diversity of wildlife that was being seen. And then really also the wonderful pictures people were sending in. You know, as a record centre, quite often I get a load of spreadsheets and data, and we do a lot of managing of information. We don't always get to see the photos. And actually, as a naturalist myself, I'd love to see this kind of thing. So we've got willow tits, actually wind chat there. Even things like lichens, people are, because of the way our naturalist works, people will have a go with a lot of stuff that they may not even know what it is. And I'll come on to that later. But also the mammals, the stoat, red squirrel, brown hares all been detected. Fantastic picture of the kingfisher and the parakeet there. So that's coming to Susan's garden, I think. And then your spoonbill, we had again quite a few photos of spoonbill turning up, which was absolutely fantastic and an amazing surprise. But yeah, so I love to see the pictures like that, and I think anyone engaging with iNaturalist, it really is a photo first kind of platform, and I would encourage people to use it in that way. So coming on to iNaturalist a bit more, you know, this links directly. Sorry, I love this quote. I'm going to read this quote off to you. Yeah, so through connecting these different perceptions and expertise of the natural world, iNaturalist hopes to create an extensive community awareness of local biodiversity and promote further exploration of local environments. So again, in terms of our action as record centres and as individuals, this is exactly what we want to be doing. We want to be promoting awareness of biodiversity issues, awareness of the local natural environment, the importance of the local natural environment, and the wildlife that inhabits it. And I think certainly in urban areas like ours, very often this is under-championed, particularly on brownfield sites, for example. Those reclaimed areas I was mentioning in St Helens can be absolutely amazing, but we don't always have the evidence to back it up. So this is building a community of individuals who recognise the importance and building up the data to back up that case as well. So iNaturalist itself was born out of a joint initiative, there you go, the California Academy of Sciences again and the National Geographic Society. I was surprised to read this week, actually, it was originally a master's project, which I didn't realise. So there were 3 students basically that developed the concept and I believe the code behind the original iNaturalist that has created this worldwide phenomenon, which in itself is a really massive achievement, actually. And obviously it's continuing to grow, so we'll see how that goes in the future. And similar to the City Nature Challenge, obviously the City Nature Challenge is born out of iNaturalist, but iNaturalist as a platform can be used year-round and for a wide range of purposes. But it is really about connecting individuals, about connecting people to nature. And this I'll keep coming back to is fundamental. You know, iNaturalist is a tool. It's a digital platform. All it's there for you to use and make the most out of. So it's really about the people behind it as much as anything else. So if you don't have that community, if you don't have the individuals engaging with it, it is just a digital platform. So you really have to think about the people that are there and engage with that. So promoting awareness, again, the other key thing, self-supporting community. So you think about those tens of thousands of people engaging with this, you know, there's no few individuals that can manage all of that. So for it to be successful, to deliver its aims, to deliver the connection, to support people in learning, the only way you can do that is by building a self-supporting community. And that's exactly what they're doing. And as a user of iNaturalist, actually, that's something I found is certainly high up on the list, and I've experienced firsthand, is that the helpfulness of people on there, and also the, not just the interest, but the experience. You have a lot of professionals and researchers within that community mingling in, you know, with the complete amateurs that don't know what they're doing. And that's really helpful and makes it a really powerful learning tool as much as anything else. So it's a very powerful engagement tool, and also a self-help and learning tool as well. So iNaturalist was set up, one of its fundamental purposes, to help people organise their data, basically, to record wildlife and to log, really, kind of as an online journal more than anything else, their experiences of nature, the things that they're seeing. And that's basically what it comes back to. In the past, we might have written this stuff down in a journal, perhaps shared that. Back in Victorian times, they might have exchanged specimens, spoken to other people within the exchange clubs. Now this is all online, and it's bigger, and things are far more immediate. And technology has allowed us to do that, but people are still fundamental to that entire process. And it's always worth, I think it's always important that we never forget that. You know, it's not just data, and it's not just, you know, a platform. There's far more to it. So this is a bit more in depth around iNaturalist. So it is multi-platform. So as a tool, you can get it as a website. It is also an app, and there's different versions of it as well. So iNaturalist app occurs as just a standalone. You can get it on Android, you can get it on your Apple phones, and it also, another version of it is called Seek. So where there's issues around kind of you don't want kids to have an online account and concerns around that, particularly where there's an online community. This version of Seek basically is a stripped back version of iNaturalist that kids, and particularly around schools, for example, can engage with the natural environment. It actually takes away the whole recording side of it, and just allows people to experience nature and to use Seek and the tools of iNaturalist to help them learn about the natural environment, to help them learn about the kind of things that they're seeing. So that's a really nice thing. If you've got kids or you work in a school, consider having a look at Seek, because it's very photo focused, and it uses the iNaturalist vision, or computer vision, that helps to identify species as a learning tool. So it's certainly worth looking at. Again, this was the quote that I really liked. This was, I picked this off the website. So no matter where you are in the world, or where in the world you are, iNaturalist brings people together, whether you have a PhD or just love the outdoors. iNaturalist will bring you closer to nature and many fellow naturalists. Viva Naturalista. And I think that's brilliant. I mean, that's a guy from Mexico, and iNaturalist is brilliant at this, at highlighting and putting spotlights on nature and people from around the world. And it really, for me, it gets to the heart of what this is all about. You know, it's about the people experiencing nature, learning about nature, and sharing that knowledge with each other to experience, to provide that experience to other generations, and that learning, so others can go away, become better naturalists, care more about the environment, and hopefully, you know, influence change, because it takes people to do that. And there's no two ways about it. Laws alone won't enable anything. People need to care, otherwise nothing happens. And I think iNaturalist, again, is a powerful tool for building that community and building that kind of spirit. So I've put down there iNaturalist websites, because the other thing iNaturalist does is it has these kind of country platforms. So if you're aware of the NBN Atlas, which is a kind of data hosting platform, iNaturalist does a similar thing where it will ask for funding from a particular country to have a platform specific. And all that's really doing is just making things a bit more relevant to a country. So if you want to see what else was going on within, your more localized area, then using the country platforms is a way to do that. The other thing iNaturalist is doing is using, I've mentioned this computer vision. So I'll go into a little bit more about that. So the computer vision is a very controversial aspect of iNaturalist. It's basically a computer algorithm which attempts to identify a species from a picture. So the way this works is based on something called TensorFlow, which is a Google machine learning algorithm. So what what they've done at the team within iNaturalist is they've taken photos of species, at least 20, which have been confidently identified by experts in the field. They've then trained this machine learning program on those images so that it can recognize, hopefully, when something else similar pops up. I say this is controversial because it can be incredibly misleading. The algorithm certainly does not pick up every single species. It does this quite useful thing where it will, if it's more confidence at higher levels of taxonomy, it will suggest the higher taxonomic level rather than the species. And that's really, really important, because what we have to remember, going back again, this is a learning tool. So the idea is that you use this algorithm and it will suggest species to you, things that it could be. And then the idea is you look at those things that it might be and think about it. So you don't just pick the one at the top of the list, you actually take either the genus or you look at the species that it's suggesting and then compare that to other resources you might have. So compare it to your local natural history books or talk to people. Or if you're not confident, go in at the higher level. So if you only know it's a bird, just say it's a bird. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The community validation of data within iNaturalist will help to pin it down afterwards. You don't have to do it immediately. Some other systems will want you to say, what species is that from the outset? And that can be quite, for some people, that's a lot of pressure, particularly if you're very new to natural history, you're very new to wildlife recording, and you really haven't got a clue. And you might feel obliged that you have to guess what species is or just not participate at all, which is actually what we've seen from our users within Merseyside Biobank, our wider network, chatting to a few people that do use iNaturalist. That's one of the reasons they'll use it, because it's a bit more flexible. There's less pressure to go straight to a species level ID, and they can still engage with it even if they're not particularly confident, because they know there are people that will help them eventually within the community. And again, that's for this focus on people and community coming back to here. So the way iNaturalist manages this within the platform is it has different tags of what it calls kind of quality of data. So sometimes you'll see a casual record is basically something that hasn't got the evidence to ever be taken any further. So it hasn't got the evidence for anyone to say for certain what it is. So if an expert comes along, there's not the proof there that that expert needs to say, oh, it's definitely that species, I can help you out with that one. So casual records are okay if you just want to share broad species. So certainly if you're a confident naturalist already, and you've recorded a lot of stuff and you know what it is and you'd like to share those data and you want to use iNaturalist to do it, you certainly can do it still. But those records would only ever be tagged as casual. The next tag there, kind of in between stage, is needs ID. And that's usually something that has the evidence. So it could be a species level identification, but doesn't currently have that agreement. So within iNaturalist, they have this community validation where you have to have a 2/3 majority agreement for a species, an identification to be considered valid. So you really do need those people to come along and to help you. And if it's the tag needs ID, there's still a possibility that will happen. The next one is research grade, and that tag only applies to species observations, to identifications, which have the 2/3 majority. So if you have 2 people, you can get a research grade kind of flag to say that it's got a majority identification. that again is a bit controversial, and you'll notice I'm saying validation, not verification. So iNaturalist does not do verification, and I think, and again, to an extent, that's a personal opinion. But verification within biology recording has a very specific meaning in the UK, certainly within the kind of biology recording community. Now, iNaturalist doesn't feed directly into that network, certainly at the moment. So we consider these flags as validation flags, community validation. So they're checks a record can go through, but that doesn't mean they can bypass verification checks later down the line. Sorry, that was a bit technical. That was my record center head coming on for a second there. But because we use these data, I think it's useful for you to understand that process and those differences. So that still goes on. So just the other thing I wanted to point out is just this chart on the bottom right there. This is the machine learning chart. So this one's all about the number of species that actually qualify for that machine learning thing. I'm just going to move on, so I think I'm dragging my heels a little bit. So I mentioned earlier with iNaturalist, you don't actually have to log in to explore data. So just very quickly, this slide, top right-hand side, you can go onto iNaturalist as a platform, not register, not log in, and immediately you can access species data. So you can go in and see what's been recorded near you without even needing to register. So if you just want to have a go, see what's on there, this is a really great way to do it. So just go onto the iNaturalist page, that slide on the top right, and you'll be presented with all the data on iNaturalist, this massive map. You can then just scroll in, zoom into the map, and you can rerun the search. So it runs within the screen, the bounding box. And you can see here, I've zoomed in down to Cheshire and then gone a bit further in Cheshire. And actually then you've got all these individual pins. These are individual records. You can then highlight and click on one of those, and that will give you the screen on the left, which actually tells exactly what's been seen. So, sorry, I'll move my mouse over there. So you can see this particular one has a research grade flag. It's got a picture or several pictures here of the species. You can see who's recorded it. And actually, if you click on that link, it will take you to their profile. You can see that its community taxon has been agreed with. In this case, 2 people have agreed. And it's got a history, basically, of that validation as well. So who's agreed with it? If there's any changes, they would also be marked there. You can also see just on the bottom here, this one's been included within a particular project. This one's been included with the MyPatch project run by Cheshire Record. Scrolling on. So if you did want to add data, there's a few things that you do need to be aware of. Always try to include evidence. Now, primarily, that's a photo. iNaturalist is very photo driven, but it can include things like sound recordings. Birds, for example, are very difficult to photograph. You can record them instead. But also even a description. Very few people actually write descriptions, but a description is a form of evidence in itself. And iNaturalist has a comment field where you can do exactly that. Be open to be criticised, particularly if you're new, and even if you're not, because people will come along and will disagree with you. And that's absolutely right that they do so. That's the process. Please don't take it personally. These people are trying to help and trying to improve the data quality on the platform. Use it as a learning experience, especially when people disagree. And if you don't know why they've disagreed, ask them. You know, and that will always be saved against your record, so you can refer back to it and you can learn from that engagement. So do be open to review. And also going back to that machine learning, the automation, it is far from perfect. So it's a guide and a tool. Please, please, please don't just select the top species on the list and go with that just because. Use it as a learning experience, use it as a tool to help you understand wildlife and nature. So this particular moth here is one I took. I put it up as an example. So the top screen there is the form you basically fill in. So I logged in, I clicked on upload, I put my photo on, and it created this form. So all I had to do was fill in the form. You can see I clicked in where it says species name, and this machine learning tool suggested a genus. So it's pretty sure this genus, and it's probably one of these species here. So I'm not into moths really, So I just picked the one at the top of the list. Pretty sure it's that genus. I looked in my book, it looked a bit like that. It occurs in the UK, so I went with the genus there. I also at the same time clicked on this one a little bit further down and adjusted the location. So the other important thing with iNaturalist, particularly the app, is that it will try to give you a location based on the phone's GPS or any GPS information attached to a photo. Quite often that's wrong, slightly out, sometimes wildly inaccurate. So please always check that. It's easy to correct. You just go into your location here and then click on the map where you saw it. The little red circle is what we call an error. So that allows us, if we're not sure of a precise location, we can make that circle bigger and say, well, it was somewhere within this red circle. And that's absolutely okay to do. The more precise you can be, probably the better for this kind of thing, but you have got that as a way to manage it. So this, I'm sorry you can't see this particularly well, this is that same moth. So up on the left here, you've got, that's my moth ID. I then tagged somebody that I know, Spoonbill, you're here, to ask if, because I knew he's into moths, maybe you can come along and help me. And actually before Steve got to me, John Haddon from the Lancs Wildlife Trust jumped in and said, actually, I think it's this species. So you can see I put the genus. John then came along and gave me a species, said, pretty sure it's this. But the community taxon, because we're not at 2/3 majority yet, the community taxon is still the genus because we don't have that agreement. Then going over to the right here, you can see, so we've got the top bit, which is moved across, and then Steve comes along, and Steve also agrees that this is Riviaris. So at which point we then gain the community taxon with the full species name because we have that 2/3 majority. And this is the learning experience, and this is the validation within iNaturalist. And this is really how it should work, is multiple people will come along and help to confirm a species identification. You can see there, Steve's also been particularly helpful because he's pointed out some likely confusion species. So because I wasn't quite sure, you know, he suggested, well, maybe you want to look at a few of these links, learn how to separate these species out. And quite often you do get that on Naturalist. You'll have specialists in a subject, you'll have researchers in bryophytes, you'll have some great birder from Norway or wherever, and they'll come in and make these suggestions and be really helpful. So yeah, so I'm just going to move quickly on to projects. So a project is a thing you can create within iNaturalist, and it's basically a set of filters that allow you to collate information. That information can be collated around location, individuals, species, and you can do it for a variety of reasons. Some people do it for research. I quite often do it for fun because I like to compare what different people are doing and what's been seen. As a record centre, we run this Liverpool City Region Biodiversity League because we wanted to try and get the local authority areas playing off against each other to generate a bit more engagement throughout the year. Some people enjoy this kind of thing, other people can't be asked, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter. But to be able to provide this kind of thing, it gives you something a bit more meaty to engage with, which for some people can be particularly useful. And the other thing to point out is this particular project is ranked by observation species and observers. So I'm always quite interested in the observers tab because as a record centre, that's telling me who's engaging with this and where that engagement is coming from. So you can see in the Sefton coast, there's a lot of people this year have been taking part in engaging, you know, almost 300 people in Sefton. Halton, we're not doing so well, only 66 people. Maybe we need to look at Halton. Maybe we need to invest a little bit more time in Halton to get people engaged. You know, is it just because they don't like iNaturalist? Is it just because they're not into wildlife recording? It'd be great to understand that. And you know, this is a good first step to be able to highlight whether, as a record centre or as an organiser, where there might be issues where we can target. And as individuals, I think it's quite nice to be able to champion your local team. And see that you're not alone as much as anything else. So here we've got, you know, over 700 people that we know are engaging just this year in the city region in wildlife recording. And again, going back to those numbers and making cases and making arguments, that's a really powerful tool. We're saying almost 2,500 species have been found just through iNaturalist. And as a record centre, we've taken data from a massive variety of sources This is just one. So again, really powerful tool there. So also kind of for interest, so this is a slightly different one. This is one that I've created. So I'm a bit into springtails and weird small things, that whatever you're into, think of an equivalent. So this particular one, I basically created a project for the whole of the UK. So I live locally, but I want to know what's going on elsewhere in this country. So I can do that very easily. And so I've basically filtered for the UK. I've filtered so I just see springtails. And actually, I think I filtered so I only get things with photos as well, because I'm quite interested to see photos of springtails in the UK. And so that's done that for me. This is effectively a set of filters that you can establish based around a wide variety of things, and you can tailor it to fit your personal needs and your personal interests. So here, I mean, the springtails quite like this. So I know there's about 300 people doing springtails on iNaturalist. That's good to know, because I know maybe 1 or 2 people locally who get involved. All of a sudden, there's a massive network of springtail people out there, which is brilliant. And you can also post messages out to these people via, so if they join your project, you can post to subscribers to your project and contact them. And you can maybe get a group together, you can chat and all that kind of stuff. If you want to do that, you don't have to. Also 2,000 observations, 59 species. That's not bad for springtails. They're quite a tricky group. So again, I could go into this and I can see, so look at those charts down there. I can see what species are being recorded. I can see who's doing it. So if I wanted to contact these people and talk springtail, I can do that quite easily through this platform. It's not so easy otherwise. You know, Facebook groups, they tend to be quite patchy. Not everyone hears about them. You may not know them. Some people don't like to use Facebook at all. Whereas this is, you know, it's community focused, it's natural history focused. And if you're into springtails, it'll pick it up quite readily. So the other side of this, again, is the research and that kind of influence in decision making. Again, as record centres, this is kind of one of the big drivers for us, for our existence, using data to influence decision makers for the benefit of local conservation and biodiversity action. So iNaturalist itself actually does this directly, but at a global scale. So iNaturalist data, if you put a record onto iNaturalist, it will feed, and it gets research grade, important point, it will feed directly into the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. It's then directly available to researchers, which includes the kind of people that define global conservation red lists. So things like the IUCN red list. Your data helps to decide what species need conservation action. And for me, that's just so incredibly powerful. As a biological recorder, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be influencing better conservation for the things I care about. So this is a really great way to do that. This is the iNaturalist data set, the screenshot here, sorry, is the iNaturalist data set on the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, mouthful, which is a public platform if you wanted to go away and make sure I'm not lying to you. The other thing I wanted to point out here, so they've got over 31 million records within that data set. And the other nice thing about GBIF is that it links directly to peer-reviewed research. So here you can see this data set has been cited in almost 1,500 peer-reviewed research papers. So again, you know, thinking about action and thinking about influencing, you know, better gains for biodiversity, better conservation, influencing research and helping to inform research through this mass participation science, citizen science. This is a really powerful way to do it. So I mentioned earlier about all the structured research the National Scheme of Society do, how powerful that is. We are increasingly seeing this mass participation, this big data kind of angle coming into play. And more researchers and research institutes are starting to look at this big data and think about how they can be using it statistically or perhaps in modelling to identify species data trends or species ranges or associations, for example, with habitat, which again can provide important information about ecology, which in turn can advise conservation action, which is really important on the ground. So it's this really positive feedback loop. Just briefly on profiles, I'm really going on now, aren't I? There's not many left, don't worry, bear with me. So the profile, this is a screenshot of the profile, my particular profile. I have it set up, and this is what you can do if you wanted to get into this kind of thing. You can set it up so you only see observations for your interest. So you can filter on your profile this initial feed by taxonomic group or by local area. You can see straight away I'm filtering there by the Liverpool City region because I'm quite interested in what's popping up locally. Then you've got all these tabs along the top, which are various other things I'm not going to go into. So your profile details, that's about your experience as a naturalist. That tab, oh, go back. The observation tab, that's basically your journal of all your records. You can edit your observations. You've got a calendar there of where you can look back and see when you've seen things with the calendar view. Your identifications, so the things that you've been learning to identify, you can quite readily see there. Personalized lists is quite a nice one. So if you wanted to see just the bryophytes that you've been finding, you can create a list of bryophytes and you can see observations just of those in a personalized list. Journal is kind of a more free text type thing that I've not really used myself. Favorites, if you see a particular observation by somebody that you favorited, that's where it gets stored. And then these projects, which I've already touched on. So you can create your own project after you've uploaded 50 verifiable observations, which is actually quite easy. It's effectively 50 photos. Or where you've joined projects other people have started, so you can join into something else if you find it interesting or would like to. So just to show you one of these lists, this is my life list. I quite like the way this is presented, which is why I've dropped it in. So if you're into pan species listing, if you like to look at everything you've ever found, this is a really nice condensed way you can actually do it. So it gives you a nice taxonomic tree on the left hand side here, which you can scroll through and you can see which species you found, or you can look at the species you haven't found. So if you wanted to challenge yourself, this is quite a nice way you might go about that. So I mentioned citizen science revolution right at the beginning. So we've covered quite a lot here, more than actually I intended. But is it a revolution? Now, what's changed? Yes, in respect that it's a new technical platform. It's driving participation in big data. It's enabling people that perhaps haven't engaged in the past, and it's bringing it to areas of the world where perhaps people weren't doing this because they didn't have the tools to do it. You've got to remember, iNaturalist is this global thing, and a lot of places haven't got the tradition or the history that we have in the UK of biology recording, of recording wildlife and using those data in the way that we do it. So in those areas, absolutely, it's changed the face of wildlife recording. In the UK, the story is slightly different. We do have this amazing history of biological recording, of natural history. And iNaturalist is coming from the outside. So we have well-established methods for dealing in wildlife data. We have our own systems that we've developed within our country that fit in with that method, with those processes, and output good quality data, both at the local scale and through the national schemes and societies. iNaturalist, to an extent, bypasses that route. So there are still discussions, and I think it's still very much an open question as to how we work with this. There's no ignoring it. I think it's fair to say the amount of people that are engaging with this now, as people become aware, this brilliant thing, it's quite exciting, it's new, which is a driver, but also is very accessible. It's very immediate, which people quite like, and it's very strong in terms of education and supporting people and building an online community, which people do genuinely respond to very positively. So it is a powerful tool. It's not going away. And certainly as a record centre, I've taken the view that because of the way people are engaging with this and the amount of very good data that's going onto the platform, we need to be engaging with it as well. I think as Biobank exists to collate information from the local area and to quality check that data and then to provide comprehensive data services, I don't see how we can do that job without engaging with iNaturalist, and particularly in the future as it grows in use and interest. But it's very much an open discussion at the moment, and there is a lot of activity trying to improve data flow between iNaturalist and local UK-based networks. So there you go, maybe controversial, I'm not sure. So a few events here, other things that are on iNaturalist. The next one coming up actually is Euro BioBlitz. So this is something that the Bristol Natural History Consortium have got up and running. So this is a European City Nature Challenge, but actually you don't have to be in a city, it's everywhere in Europe, and it's over 2 days. So you can do it from wherever in the country, and it's basically a more personalised league. So it's not a city versus city, it's individuals taking part, exploring European flora and fauna. I've already shown the Biodiversity League. If you're in the city region, please do take part in that. Maybe go to Halton, get your name on the list there. They need a bit of help. Cheshire Record has a couple of projects that they've set up themselves. So I just want to shout out to the My Patch Record project and the Dalston Nature Watch group. Those are actually both members only projects. So if you do want to participate in those, do look them up, and you have to actually join the project to be able to contribute to it. So please do, if you're into this, go or want to have a go, do go away and look those up. Urban Green Up is something that we're doing with Liverpool Council in the city region. So if you're ever over in the Baltic Triangle, please do get on iNaturalist and send in a few photos. And then next year we've got the City Nature Challenge 2022. Those are the dates there. We have entered. I have been told that we will be taking part, so we will. Also, it's worth pointing out that other organisations are doing this as well. Forestry England, or Community Forest England, whatever they're called at the moment, have got really into iNaturalist, particularly on their woodland, their ownership, so their property, I should say. And they're already using iNaturalist to collate information on biodiversity within those woodland properties, and they are using that information to help advise the ranger services and how they manage those woodlands in terms of wildlife and for conservation. So worth being aware of.